Hello everyone, this is Professor Vigneron, and today I will talk about the legal foundation within the concept of entrepreneurship. You want to have some legal foundation, even though most businesses and people that start a business don't think of it as being so important. They may be thinking about the fact that they need to choose a form of business organization as the first thing. But first is establish your code of ethics. You need to identify an attorney. There's lots of attorneys, and there will be some more suited for you based on the industry, based on the type of um, resources and the size of your business that you will establish. You're going to have to think about which attorney would be best. You're going to have to think about drafting some documents um, because you will have partners. You will interact with other businesses, with suppliers. And so you're going to have to think about business contracts and so forth. So that's also why it's important to have an attorney to get this help. You want to avoid and preserve yourself from legal dispute. You want to think about the fact that you will need some permits and licenses. And again, you're going to have to think about what is the best form of business structure to have, legal structure to have. So codes of ethics are very important because you are creating a company that will interact with other people, and you want to have a minimum of rules for how you're going to interact with them, and you want to lead by examples. You want to essentially improve your reputation, have some kind of ethics with your employees, improve how the customers sees you. You want to decrease any possibility of being vulnerable and avoid being put into a position where you will be seen as not being ethical. So how soon should you select an attorney? I think you should look for an attorney as quickly as possible, and you should think about attorneys as having different skills sets. There's attorneys to defend you, and there's an attorney to prepare you in case you need to defend yourself, and there's smaller, bigger attorneys, more specialized attorneys in your industry. There's general attorney in business, and then there's attorneys that are just specific in the music business industry. So all of these attorney skills is something that you need to make yourself knowledgeable. If you don't, you will learn about it the hard way, which is by going through the pain of all the things that happens that you never thought of. Attorneys have the experience, and they see a lot of bad things happening, and they can prepare yourself and protect yourself from bad things to happen. I don't think of attorneys as people that I want to use when I need it. So I want to think about attorneys as people that I want to use in order to avoid being in trouble. So how you select attorneys is you could look at the local bar who specialize in startups. You could look at the local chamber of commerce that would have a list of attorneys. You can talk to this attorney. You can, sometimes they are attorneys that give free help as part of an organization, again, through the Chamber of Commerce. You want to think about attorneys in what they've done in the past and how quickly they are known to be doing things. That's a problem sometimes with attorneys. They can be very slow and you have to run after them, even though they cost a lot of money. They get busy and they get sidetracked with other projects. And it's possible that if you deal with a bigger attorney, that they will not put you on their priority list. And so that's important that you keep up. It's important that you study what you want them to do before you ask them to do it, I think. Study, what I mean by study is you can study 2 minutes or you can study hours, but it's studying nothing, I think, is dangerous. It's not to try to place yourself as an attorney when you're not one, but having some knowledge prior to dealing with attorney is very important. That's why sometimes I think having mentors is very important, because oftentimes you choose a mentor that has experience, and part of the experience will be this legal experience, even though they may not be attorneys. This legal experience will save you a lot of trouble. So the first thing is you start this business, and you, as it's oftentimes done, you start with someone else. Is what is the relationship between these people? This is called a shareholder agreement. So how do you break down the ownership of the business that you're working on? At the very beginning, it's easy to understand who's doing what and how much everyone owns, and you want to do it as quickly as possible. You want to also think about the, the, the way of compensating each other. At the beginning, it's probably not going to be no compensation, but you can always think about the sweat equity that you're giving, and there could be some kind of way of compensating someone who's very active, not now, but in the future, in case there's profits. How long will you have to stay in this business in order to gain ownership? So this one, I can explain it to you, but the best way to learn about it is having gone through it and maybe been having had trouble with it. But what it means is that oftentimes there's a lot of people that want to jump in at the beginning, but there's not many people that are going to stay. So if at the beginning everybody gets the same equity, you will quickly realize that a year after, there's some people that did a lot and there's some people that didn't do anything. So that was the first mistake, is you didn't think about equity in terms of having done something and within a certain period of time, and then you all have different shares, even though there's people that didn't do anything. So this is why you want a founder's agreement. This is a slide that you want to go back to, I would say, in 6 months, in a year, when you have more experience, and then this will make way more sense because having lived through the experience yourself. So what is the business about would be one of the things that you would want to discuss inside this founders agreement. What would be the title of the founders? That's also very important. There's some people that really work for the status and not so much for the compensation. I mean, there's people that work for the compensation and the status, but there's some people, they are motivated by the fact that they're called director, and you want to take this into consideration. And that may be, they may take no money, but they would want to be called at least director or something like that. So everyone is sensitive, knowing what everyone wants from the get-go, and making it on paper is very important. And very much, this is going to be the thread of this presentation, is put it on paper. What's not on paper is confusing. What's not on paper is misinterpreted. And even if it's on paper, it is still could be misinterpreted, but it's decreased the chances of having some misinterpretation. What is the legal form of business that you want to establish from your company, knowing that these things can change? It's not like, it's not easy to change, but it can be changed, and therefore you want to start with something. Is there stocks, and then explain how many stocks there are, and who gets how many stocks. And then again, talking about compensation. So it's like, how much would you make in case there's profit? And then you can also think of, that's very important, is to think about some kind of delay compensation as well, which means that if the company, when the company makes money, this person will make X, and therefore that's sort of a motivation for someone to work now and work in the future to get in the future some kind of profit in order to be delayed payment. I think that is very good when you have someone that put a lot of sweat equity. They may not be compensated, but you want to keep some kind of passive accounting that is kept for the day off, where things change, that you can bring back around the table when discussing with the partners, in order to bring back maybe some of that compensation for the work that was done in the past. What is the capital, and how much everyone puts in order to build this capital investment at the beginning? And then obviously is the buyback clause. So the buyback clause is, once the business is rolling, there may be some people that want to go away, and how do you buy them back? When do you buy them back? And I think you would want to have some kind of milestone, where after there's rules for before that milestone and after that milestones, because sometimes it is not very fair to buy back someone when they haven't done anything and when not much has happened, and then they didn't invest much, and then they would own a percentage of something they haven't done very much. So you want to make sure there's some milestones, so that way it's fair. You want to be as fair as possible at the beginning, and this agreement is very important, because by doing it, you can actually find out a lot about your partners and the behavior they would have in this situation of making this friendly agreement at the beginning, will tell you a lot about when things don't get so friendly and how they would behave. It's not 100% telling you everything, but it tells you something. So legal disputes will come. There's 100% sure that you will have some legal disputes. They could happen after a week or they could happen after a year, but it's not going to be very long before you start getting some level of legal dispute. So it's important that you know some of the rules of the law. You, as an entrepreneur, want to avoid legal disputes. So one thing you need to do is you need to have contracts and meet all your contract obligations. You want to make sure you have enough money so you pay people and then you don't get into a position where you're owning money and you have debts and you have problems with the people you owe the money. You want to try to get as many things in writing, that's what I said before, and you want to set some standards so that way you stay within the standards and it's very clear for everyone. So it is very tempting not to put anything in writing at the beginning because you want to look like you're good with everyone and you trust everyone. But in fact, it will not be good very soon. The notion of trust is one thing, but the notion of having everything in written is not because you don't trust. It's because you want to maximize clarity and you want to also have the opportunity for everyone to formally explain how they see things very clearly. So essentially, put things in writing and you will avoid a lot of disputes. So you may need licenses and permits. It's almost certain anywhere in America you will need some kind of business license that you will have to pay in the city where you're running your business. You may need a state license, you may need a county license, you may need a city business license. All of these is you have to check with the local area where your business is in order to see which one you need. Permits are the same. Permits may be temporary, but it depends what you're doing and where you're doing it. So if you're selling food, you're going to need a health permits. If you have public and a bunch of people involved in this business, you will have to have some kind of fire permit. If you're putting a sign, you will have to have some kind of permit to put a sign. If you have different business name, you have the name of the business, and then you have the name of the commercial name that you use to run this business. That's called fictitious business name. You will have to have a permit. You'll have to submit a request for a fictitious business name. And you need to make sure you have this because you could run again into misinterpretation and you could be fined for not having these documents. So what are the different business forms? The business forms, there's 4 basic business forms: sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, and LLCs. The idea behind this is the cost of setting these businesses. Some are almost nothing, and some are much more expensive. So it goes from $150 to $2,000, depending on the one that you choose. But it's not the setup that is so expensive, it's the maintenance that gets much more expensive. And this is not temporary. Creating the business is a one-time fee, but maintaining it is a monthly or annual fee that you have to take into consideration. You have personal assets. You want to protect your personal assets. You have nothing to lose. It's different than if you have a lot to lose. So you have to think about the protection in terms of liability that you want to have. There is also consideration in terms of if you have other businesses, if you're married, and how you do your taxes, if you have multiple residencies, all of that have an influence in which one of the corporation foundation that you want to take. Depending on the number of investors that you want to have, depending on the type of investors that you have, depending if these investors are domestic or from overseas, you will have different choice of business structures. Just to summarize these business structures, the sole proprietorship is just you. You have a dog cleaning truck, and it's possible that you take a sole proprietorship. It's the fastest, easiest. You don't have too much liability. and therefore that could be one choice as an example. Partnership, it's very specific for if you are actually an attorney, or if you are like a dentist, or if you are some insurance company. The partnership usually works for this type of um, industries for some very legal reasons that are beyond the scope of this presentation. Then corporation, you have two kinds, the S-class and the C-class, and these are usually selected because the organization is trying to eventually have many investors, and investors through complicated IPO type of systems where people are going to be buying shares, and that would be one of the choices, or maybe because you have many investors from overseas. LLC is one of the most recent form of business entity, and there it's sort of is not too expensive to set up. It's sort of simple to simpler to maintain than a corporation, and so it's like a smaller version of what a corporation maintenance is, but at the same time, it doesn't offer all the functionalities that the corporation have. It's more limited in what you can do with an LLC compared to what you could do with a corporation. But the corporation does everything, and sometimes the LLC, just to put a number, maybe it's like 85% of what a corporation can do is the LLC can do, and you don't need all of the other options that a corporation offers, and therefore you would rather go for something that is a simplified version of a corporation. What are the other elements that are important is copyrights. It's this creative work that you're trying to protect. It has a specific length of time, and there's a specific organization that is looking after them. Patents are lasting 20 years. There's two types of patents. There's the design and the utility. It has to have some kind of new functionality or some kind of new technical ideas. Applying for patents is relatively easy. Getting a patent is much more complicated, and therefore it's sort of required for 99% of the people to get an attorney to get this patent approval. Licensing is this use of those copyrights, such as the use of the patent or the use of these intellectual properties, such as the use of the patents or the copyright or the trademark, which I will talk after. So how things work, how they are made, what they are made of, that's what the patent is going to be very much working on. You want to protect it to make sure it was not used in the past, and you're doing something that is new, and that in the future you will have the credit for having created first, and the protection that goes with it. This protection will protect you in the territory where you have requested the protection. So it's not an international protection from the get-go. So you have to think about this and the cost involved with this. There are multiple steps in the process of getting protection. It needs to be useful to be used for something. So as I said, the utility protection is the fact that the way it works, and if that's what is going to be protected, like a new engine invention versus the design, it's more of an appearance, and it will protect the appearance and the decorative element, such as a new Coke bottle or the shape of this new bottle. So the utility protection is essentially is going to look at protecting the function of this invention. It's going to make it harder for someone to copy you, and it's going to give you a rather broad spectrum of the variation around this utility that you have had the protection being accepted. However, it is a very expensive process. It will take 2 to 3 years, and it's not going to protect the design of the product. In contrast, the design of the product is much more affordable and faster to get. However, it's only protecting the decorative ornamental design. It doesn't protect how it is being used. So there's no functional protection, and it's much easier for a competitor to find a way around your protection with a slight modification of a design that will be sufficient to be deemed as being different. So it is very specific to, therefore, the design that you are getting the patent, and therefore it doesn't give you much protection to making alternative to some slight variation of the design that you have been protected. So it's very specific to the one thing. So even though it's more affordable and it's faster, is you have to make many more requests for protection of all of the various elements that you come up with. The trademark is this design name that is associated with the product and help people identify it. Every brand could have the logo TM, which is where you are claiming the trademark for this brand and using it like this. But eventually you want to get the R, which means it's registered. So the R is registered in the United States with the US Patent Administration, but it's registered in the world, if you're not registering to each country, through an organization which is called WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. And it's in Switzerland, and there you can get the protection of your brand. So you protect your brand in your own country, and right away, or when you get the authorization from your own country, you can ask from the international office to get protection in specific country that you specify to them. So what's in a name? This is a document that you can look at that essentially gives you a very quick idea of the point to consider when you're coming up with a name. Is you want to make sure that it's available and that you can use it without getting in trouble. And another thing that I want to say is you want a name that is helpful because it's sort of let people remember what it is. And I found this as a very good example of that. My Spy Bird House. And that's the whole name. It's like a sentence. And it's essentially the name of the product that these people are trying to say. This concludes my presentation for the legal foundation of entrepreneurship. Bye-bye.